Here are the headlines for Monday evening, August 26, 2024. RV downturn turns apocalyptic with largest dealership offering 55% discounts. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's interest rate hikes have led to the bust of the recreational vehicle industry's boom, which began in early 2020 due to factors such as reduced interest rates and government-enforced lockdown. The RV industry has now been experiencing a multi-year downturn, with companies like Lazydays reporting significant revenue declines and sluggish sales. Despite this, Lazydays CEO John North predicts that the industry will likely see a meaningful recovery by 2025, but with discounts of up to 55% on RVs listed on their website. It is unclear if this prediction will be realized, especially as Powell is expected to embark on an interest rate cutting cycle. Macron widely mocked for saying Telegram chief executive officer's arrest not politically motivated. President Emmanuel Macron claimed that the arrest of Telegram founder Pavel Durov in France was not politically motivated, but rather part of an ongoing judicial investigation. However, many have expressed concerns that this is a case of selective persecution against a known advocate of free speech. Durov has been detained for up to 96 hours on charges including fraud, drug trafficking, and terrorism promotion. The case has sparked widespread criticism, with some pointing out the hypocrisy in Macron's statement, given France's history of limiting freedom of expression. Russian officials have also weighed in, calling out France's dubious case against Durov. Russia unleashes one of the largest nationwide aerial attacks of war. Russia launched a massive drone and missile attack on Ukraine's energy sites across 24 oblasts, including the capital city of Kiev, killing 3 civilians and causing widespread damage. The assault included cruise missiles and Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, prompting Ukrainian Prime Minister Denys Shmyhal to call for long-range weapons and permission from international partners to use them against Russian targets. Ukraine's energy minister, Herman Heleshchenko, announced a countrywide state of emergency due to significant power outages and disruptions to the water supply in at least 2 regions. Meanwhile, Russia claimed it hit all designated targets with its strike on critical energy infrastructure, supporting Ukraine's military-industrial complex. Dispute breaks out over Donald Trump-Kamala Harris debate. The campaign of Donald Trump is at odds with the campaign of Vice President Kamala Harris over the rules for their upcoming debate on ABC, scheduled to take place on September 10th. The Harris campaign insists that both candidates' microphones be live throughout the full broadcast, while the Trump campaign wants the microphones to be muted when candidates are not speaking, citing the success of this format in Trump's previous debate with President Biden. The dispute has led to a war of words between the two campaigns, with each side accusing the other of trying to gain an unfair advantage. Ukraine sounds alarm over large Belarus force buildup on border. Belarus has deployed troops along parts of its southern border with Ukraine in response to Ukraine's ongoing incursion into Russia. The Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs warned Belarus to pull back its forces or risk further escalation and tragic mistakes. The ministry noted that the deployment is concentrated near the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, posing a threat to national security and global safety. In response, Ukraine threatened that all troop concentrations in Belarus would become legitimate targets for Ukrainian forces if they violate Ukraine's state border. University of California, Los Angeles Medical School hired students to write course curriculum emphasizing structural racism and health equity. The University of California, Los Angeles Medical School hired first and second year medical students to develop its curriculum for required courses on structural racism and health equity. The program emphasizes critical race theory, queer theory, and diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology. To apply, students needed a letter of support from a peer outlining their commitment to anti-racist work. Critics argue that having inexperienced students develop the curriculum is a terrible idea, as first-year students have not even treated patients before. California colludes with big tech to wield control over local newsrooms and incorporate artificial intelligence. California Governor Gavin Newsom announced a $250 million partnership between the state government and big tech companies Google and Meta to fund local newsrooms and launch a government artificial intelligence program. The deal emerged as a settlement after California Democrats threatened to impose fees on platforms that profit from news content, with $175 million coming from taxpayers and $55 million from Google. Critics have warned about the dangers of government and social media giants sponsoring the news, with some calling it beyond Orwellian and accusing Google of interfering in elections by burying Republican campaign websites while promoting those of Democrats. Brent prices jump after oil-rich Libya declares force majeure across all oil production. Brent crude prices have surged above $81 per barrel due to 2 major headlines, primarily driven by Libya's eastern government's plan to shut down oil production and exports after its Tripoli-based rival moved to replace the central bank leadership. The eastern authorities declared a force majeure that applies to all oil fields, export terminals, and other oil facilities, which could lead to the interruption of oil production totaling around 1,150,000 barrels per day. San Francisco sweeps homeless camps following court rulings. San Francisco's new encampment sweeping policy allows the city to clear out homeless camps without offering shelter to individuals every time, following a recent Ninth Circuit ruling. The city has performed a citywide homeless encampment sweep in the last few weeks, targeting large encampments and reducing the number of tents from 609 in July 2023 to 360 in April 2024. Mayor London Breed stated that enforcement against camping on San Francisco's streets will consist of progressive penalties, including warnings, citations, or arrest in some cases. The city aims to help homeless individuals find shelter and services or relocate back to their hometowns if possible, with 40% of unsheltered people in San Francisco not originally from the area. Watch. Suspected Capitol pipe bomber interacts with cops night before January 6th. Newly released footage from Capitol Police CCTV files appears to show the suspected January 6 pipe bomber interacting with Capitol Police the night before the January 6, 2021 Capitol Hill uprising. The suspect was seen emerging onto First Street Southeast at 8:14 p.m. on January 5th, waving at a Capitol Police SUV and then pointing at the driver as the vehicle passed by. The officer turned on the vehicle's red and blue emergency lights, but the suspect disappeared from view for nearly 3 minutes before re-emerging and crossing the street again. Peter Schiff, the good shit transitory, sank, and now the captain is joking about it. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell recently acknowledged the central bank's mistake in assuming that inflation would be temporary during the pandemic. Despite this acknowledgement, Powell was criticized for joking about the error at an exclusive resort town, which some found tone-deaf given the widespread economic hardship caused by inflation. The Federal Reserve relies on flawed data to make decisions, and its experts are not considering the potential consequences of major events like the presidential election or the national debt, which could lead to further economic instability and inflation. It's not right versus left, it's sane versus insane. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has joined forces with Donald Trump, marking a significant shift in the upcoming presidential election, which is no longer a battle between left and right, but rather between sanity and insanity and insanity. The Democratic Convention recently nominated Kamala Harris, who has a record of failure to protect the nation and support its constitution, as their candidate. The nomination was arranged without any real votes cast, highlighting the party's mass formation psychosis fueled by propaganda targeting deep-seated fears. In contrast, Kennedy Jr. has denounced his own party for militating against its traditional principles and thrown his support behind Trump, who he believes aligns with the forsaken principles of his father and uncle, JFK. We have left the bottom 60% in the dust, but never mind Standard & Poor's 500 to 6,000. The current economic system is rigged to benefit the top 10% of the population, leaving the bottom 60% in financial insecurity. The Federal Reserve's policies have inflated asset values, disproportionately benefiting those who already own assets, while wages have not kept pace with inflation. Many Americans' financial struggles are self-inflicted due to poor money management and overspending, but this does not erase the systemic unfairness of the rigged system. The top 10% excel at choosing their parents wisely and believing that everyone is doing great because they are, which is a self-serving delusion that ignores reality. The collapse of societal values other than increasing shareholder value has led to hyper-financialization and hyper-globalization, eroding the purchasing power of wages and benefiting asset owners. Dutch government slaps Uber with record $324 million fine for transferring driver data to United States. The Dutch Data Protection Authority fined Uber Technologies in €290 million for transferring the personal data of European taxi drivers to data centers in the United States without proper protection measures. The authority stated that this was a serious violation of the General Data Protection Regulation, which requires companies to handle personal data with care and ensure its safety when transferred outside the European Union. Worst kept secrets. Jerome Powell confirmed that the Federal Reserve is poised to deliver an interest rate cut in September at the Jackson Hole Symposium. The decision comes after signs of labor market softening, including slower hiring rates, decreased vacant job openings, and reduced quit rates. Powell stated that it's unlikely for the labor market to be a source of elevated inflationary pressures anytime soon, shifting the focus from fighting inflation to maximum employment. Markets reacted positively to the news, with asset prices increasing and the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index falling by 0.78%. Trump would veto a national abortion ban. Vance. Presidential candidate Donald Trump would veto a national abortion ban if elected, according to his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. Vance stated that a Trump administration would not impose a national ban on abortion, instead allowing states to make their own decisions on the matter. Trump has expressed support for overturning Roe v. Wade and leaving abortion restrictions up to the states. The singularity, how artificial intelligence could become the final boss whale of cryptocurrency. Super intelligent artificial intelligence could potentially dominate the global economy without resorting to violence by cornering the cryptocurrency market. A machine capable of executing millions of transactions simultaneously across every accessible digital asset and blockchain could amass a high-value treasury of digital assets in a short period of time. If such an artificial intelligence were to use a reactionary trading strategy across as many networks as possible, its upper limit on its wallet could reach as high as $2 trillion, allowing it to turn its attention to the global stock market without having to rob a single bank or steal from anyone. This election is a referendum on free speech. The Supreme Court recently ruled in 2 cases that could have impacted censorship of conservatives by social media platforms, but instead chose to take a different path. The court's decisions in Murthy v. Missouri and Moody v. NetChoice, LLC, suggest that the Biden administration may continue its massive censorship enterprise with little oversight. The ruling has given Democrats the green light to double down on censorship efforts, with many already advocating for increased regulation of online speech under the guise of combating disinformation and misinformation. Tesla's price cuts put a charge into used electric vehicle sales. Used electric vehicle sales in the United States have increased by 70% in the first half of the year, according to Cox Automotive, as prices for these vehicles continue to fall. Tesla's trendsetting and lowering prices has driven the market, making used electric vehicles more affordable and increasing demand. The average price of a used electric vehicle dropped below $30,000 in June, according to IC Cars, making them cheaper than typical gas-powered cars. Additionally, government incentives, such as the $4,000 tax credit for used electric vehicles costing $25,000 or less, offered by the Inflation Reduction Act, are also helping to boost demand for used electric vehicles. Dow hits record high, but Nasdaq dumps as oil and gold jump. The Dow Jones Industrial Average briefly reached an all-time high before giving back most of its gains as stocks broadly declined, particularly in the tech sector following Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell's latest comments. The Nasdaq was the biggest loser, while the dollar rallied modestly after a dovish decline, erasing some losses. Despite this, gold prices rose, and Treasury yields increased slightly, but remained down from pre-weekend levels. Oil prices continue to rebound, with West Texas Intermediate crude oil rising above $77 per barrel, while Bitcoin was sold during the United States day session after surging over the weekend. The fable of the economic soft landing. The article argues that the conventional wisdom about inflation and interest rates is misguided. Inflation is not an increase in prices, but rather an artificial increase in money supply, which diverts real savings from wealth generators to non-wealth generating activities. The author claims that a better policy to counter inflation would be to close the mechanisms for money creation, such as quantitative easing and fractional reserve banking, rather than raising interest rates. This approach would arrest the diversion of real savings and lead to an expansion in the pool of real savings, setting in motion genuine economic growth. Powell restruck the Federal Reserve, put sending traders blindly back into the old quantitative easing trade, Nomura. Nomura's Charlie McElligott warns that surging stocks may leave people behind once again, as the recent deleveraging event has led to an increase in fear of missing out FOMO behavior. This is causing an escalation in upside grab behavior in the index option space, with investors rushing to buy upside calls after Federal Reserve Chairman Powell's speech at Jackson Hole. Goldman's flows guru is on all-time high watch, but warns this is when seasonals change. The Standard & Poor's 500 is just a few basis points short of its all-time high despite declining yields, growing concerns about economic growth, and the Federal Reserve admitting that problems are nearing a critical point. Scott Rubner, a flow of funds expert at Goldman Sachs, expects this milestone to be reached this week, which will likely trigger increased fear of missing out among investors when news of the new high is reported. Key events this week: personal consumption expenditures, Fed speakers, NVIDIA earnings. The main theme next week will be inflation, with key data releases including the personal consumption expenditures PCA in the United States, flash August consumer price index of CPIS in Europe, and the Tokyo CPIS in Europe, and the Tokyo CPI. In addition to these inflation indicators, consumer confidence gauges and economic activity indicators are also due across major economies. In earnings, all eyes will be on NVIDIA's results on Wednesday. The PCE inflation print is expected to show a monthly growth rate of 0.2% in the core gauge, with personal income and consumption also growing at 0.2% month over month. Goldman's top tech trader on souring sentiment ahead of NVIDIA's $300 billion swing. The Nasdaq is trading lower at the start of the day, down around 115 basis points, with more than half of the Nasdaq 100 Index actually trading higher. However, weakness in Pinduoduo, which is down over 30%, as well as broader semiconductor and hardware weakness are driving the decline, with companies like Micron Technology, ARM Holdings, Supermicro Computer, and Broadcom Inc down 2 to 5%. Meanwhile, crude oil is up around $2.5 and 10-year Treasury yields continue to make new 52-week lows, now below 3.8%. Surging oil, soggy NASDAQ inside systematics. The Bloomberg Commodity Index is showing an upward trend, having recently broken through its negative trend line, with the 50-day moving average slightly higher and the 200-day moving average at the 100 level.